The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you for joining our 2019 Year in Review webinar. I'm Media Melanie, the Social Media Manager for Actionable Intelligence. Today, we'll be reviewing the major news events from 2019 that affected the office and home digital printing markets and offer thoughts on the upcoming year. The slides from today's webcast will be available at actionintel.com, along with a download of the webcast recording. We will have a question and answer session at the end, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Attendees may also send individual questions to our team of analysts at any time. If you're tweeting along with us, please use hashtag AIWebcast to bookmark our conversation. Thank you. And with that, here is the President of Actionable Intelligence, Charles Brewer.
Thank you, Melanie. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're sounding loud and clear to me, Charlie.
Very good. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Melanie, and welcome everyone. I think I should say good morning and good evening and good afternoon. We have quite a diverse crowd out there. I noticed that folks are calling in from all over the world, so we are very pleased. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today. The two speakers will be myself and Christina Bonadio. She's the executive editor for our website. And I think that many of you know us, so I won't go into our bio too much. We really are thrilled to have everyone here today. We'd like to thank you, and we'd also like to thank our sponsors, Brother, Epson, Future Graphics, HP, LD, and Static Control. Without our sponsors, we really wouldn't be able to do this. Much of the talk I'm going to be giving today, and Christina will be following on, has been taken from posts that were on our website. We now have over 4,500 articles on the website, and we're visited by thousands of visitors from around the world. So if you don't know our website, we suggest that you get to know us. We are having a special promo for attendees of this conference. Please use the promotion code YR2019, and that you get $100 off, and that's good through the end of the month. So with that, I'm going to move on. That'll be the only ad that we have during the talk. We have what looks to be a pretty light agenda, but it's actually pretty deep. So why don't we just get right in? Excuse me. So 2019 was a tough year for most OEMs. As we watched over the course of the year, we saw that a lot were reporting lower revenue and at least revised their projections downward one time in 2019. Many had to revise their projections downward more than once. We noticed that for the bulk of OEMs, that sales of supplies had declined, and that was true for many third-party supplies vendors too. Many regions, I think, things are uncertain. There is, some uncertainty in Europe around Brexit. We know that we've got some uncertainty around the trade war between the U.S. and China, and there are just other geopolitical things that are kind of keeping the global economy down. So last year was actually the least robust growth in worldwide GDP, according to the World Bank, and unfortunately, this year is not going to be a heck of a lot better. In addition to uncertainty, we also saw that exchange rates were adversely impacting many companies. This is especially true for the Japanese OEMs. But if we take all the economics out of the equation, we believe that the market for hardware and supplies now has reached a new downward inflection point. I think that it's been pretty widely recognized that in established markets, the decline was about 1 or 2%. We think now that it's more in the order of 2 to 3%, although it is still growing in many of the emerging markets. So as it has been for the last few years, the U.S. market is the strongest, and printing is tied to GDP, and the U.S. economy has been pretty good. So we've been able to sustain a pretty good demand although it is weaker than what we've seen in the past. The reason that the economy, that we have so much printing going on is because our unemployment is at a 50-year low. It's been very good for a number of years, and it's been at this new low since all during the autumn. We follow Manpower, and Manpower is a staffing organization. They do surveys of various managers. They do one once a quarter of 11,500 managers in a variety of different vertical markets, and the vast majority, 94%, said that they were either going to keep their staffing levels at the same level, or they were going to increase their staff. So it looks like unemployment ought to be pretty stable in our region for the upcoming year. But while we still have a strong employment picture, again, we're seeing the overall consumables market weaken. And I think that that's another indication that the print volumes have fallen. The industry is reassessing the market. We've seen a lot of bold changes made both by OEMs and by the third-party supplies vendors. Over the past 5 years, there's been a lot of restructuring at the OEMs. Some of them, if you think of HP and Xerox, they've really radically restructured. OEMs are also changing their business models, or at least they're adjusting them. We see that hardware manufacturers are really trying to get away from their reliance on revenue, or excuse me, on profits from the revenue on supplies. What we have seen over the last 5 to 7 years is a new willingness by OEMs to compete on price for aftermarket sales. If you think about programs that HP's run, like Clean Sweep and Quicksilver and others, it's allowed them to really go after the remanufacturing industry, compete more on price, and take back market share. So we continue to see that last year. We're also seeing new alliances being formed as the OEMs are looking for new opportunities. So one company that was constantly in the headlines last year was Xerox. Xerox has been undergoing some big changes for several years now, and last year really was no different. We entered the year after there had been some dust up between Xerox and Fujifilm over their joint venture, the Fuji Xerox. When we entered the year, there was a $1 billion lawsuit that had been filed, but over the course of the year, things kind of settled down, and everybody, cooler heads prevailed, and they struck a deal. The two companies struck a deal that Xerox will get $2.3 billion for its share in Fuji Xerox, and that deal also preserved Xerox's access to Fuji Xerox engines and other technologies. So I think that it settled fairly amicably. I think that the future between these two companies is unclear. We know that the Xerox has had fewer and fewer engines from Fuji over the last couple of years, and that's certainly going to continue. Fujifilm did pretty well last year. Their revenue dropped, as we looked at the first half, their revenue had dropped 2.5%. We don't have complete year data yet on the firms. The Japanese companies, their fiscal year ends in March, so we only have the first half for them. And we're looking for the end of year results from some of the American companies. So we'll go into earnings season in a couple of weeks. So keep an eye on our website, and we'll be reporting those results as they come in. So the Fuji Xerox thing that went on for a long time, but over the last couple of months, I'm sure you're all aware of the moves by Xerox to acquire HP. Now, we don't have enough time. It would take well over an hour to talk about all the different ramifications of this deal. We're just going to say that it's a mixed bag. I think that it would be great for HP to gain access to Xerox's channel, and it would be great for Xerox to gain access to HP's assets. But I think that doing a straight out acquisition, that might be a little dramatic. So we'll leave the analysis of that whole deal to the Wall Street guys, and we'll just focus on what we know best, and that's supplies. And for supplies watchers, the real big news out of Xerox came in June when it announced that it would start sourcing print engines from HP. Now, this is great for HP. It gave them an OEM client in Xerox, and it allowed Xerox to step away a little bit from Fuji or lessen its reliance on them. It also gave HP a new toner supplier. I think that this alliance kind of built on a long existing relationship between Xerox and Samsung. Of course, HP acquired Samsung a couple of years ago, so it's pretty well-known technology, and I think it was a win-win for both companies. But the real supplies news came in July as a result of the HP Xerox alliance. We wondered what was going to happen with Xerox's reman business. Xerox had been selling remanufactured cartridges for HP machines for decades, and we thought that might not continue because HP has been really aggressive about getting market share back from the remanufacturers. And so in July, we started to hear that Clover was going to lose a major customer. We believe that to be Xerox. Then we heard that Moody's was lowering its rating of Clover's debt because it lost customer. Anyway, it created quite a stir, and we're going to talk about this more later on. But I think that really was really one of the biggest news items from 2019. Xerox continues to see its revenue decline last year along with installs. We see that its shrinking install base is causing it to lose some of its aftermarket revenue, and the operating margin seems to be holding up pretty well for Xerox, but overall, it really wasn't a banner year for the firm. Another big announcement that we heard last year was the alliance between Ninestar and Konica Minolta. We saw a press release that really didn't have a lot of detail come out back in August, but one thing that caught our attention was the fact that the pair said that they were in close collaboration on A3 copiers, A4 printers, 3D printers, and chips. We assume that this alliance is going to allow Konica Minolta to continue to source A4 engines from the Lexmark, and then that's now a Ninestar subsidiary. This relationship has been in place for a number of years, so we're not surprised to hear that. One thing we did see that was kind of interesting. We were at the trade show in Zhuhai, China, back in October, and walking around the show floor, went to the Panta booth. Panta is Ninestar's other hardware subsidiary, and in the booth we saw what they called a digital press, and it was a big A3 machine that looked to be based on Konica Minolta technology. So that was pretty interesting. So again, I think that this is a great alliance for Lexmark. It builds, and their revenue has been declining a little bit. We know that their unit shipments have declined too. There is some possibility, we heard last year, that the U.S. government is considering cutting some of its orders from Lexmark because of concerns over a Chinese owner. So to have an OEM customer like Konica Minolta is great news for Lexmark. It's also great that Phantom can get access to the A3 machines because Phantom is growing its business both within China and outside of China. So this will broaden the portfolio for the company. As we look at this deal, we wonder what the implications are for supplies. Ninestar has a complete set of consumables for a variety of different OEMs, but suddenly, after this alliance was announced, we noticed that all the Konica Minolta supplies went away. Now, this is a big deal in and of itself because Ninestar is so big, but Ninestar also has chip assets, and they have about 80% of the market share worldwide for chips that go on cartridges. So if these chips go away, that would be great news for Konica Minolta, and it also might give Ninestar a bargaining chip, if you will, as it negotiates deals with other OEMs. So we thought that was really a big deal, and it was pretty interesting. So we're going to look at the business at some of the other OEMs, and I apologize if your company isn't in here, but we really kind of focused on the OEMs that had big news announcements, or we saw big moves at those companies last year, and a few of them, were relatively quiet, so they may not be profiled here. So Brother continues to have really great success in North America with its workhorse line. These are A4 laser printers that are targeted at small to medium-sized businesses. These are higher-end machines for Brother. It's kind of a new market category that they've gone into over the past few years. Brother's really known as an entry-level and a SOHO hardware developer, and they continue to be really strong in that market segment too. Some of their lower-end machines are the #1 selling hardware on Amazon. Also, a lot of their supplies are #1 sellers, so they're doing really well at the low end of the market. With all that said, the company reported that for the first half, their printer and their laser printer and consumable sales were down. Inkjet hardware sales were up, but the supplies were flat. So Brother revised its forecast downward at the end of the second quarter. Canon has been working hard to fill out its product lines and compete in various categories. And now there isn't a lot of channel distinction between its image runners and its image class devices. So we can continue to see them move down market. But the big news out of Canon last year was just what a bad year it was. Revenue dipped like 5% for the first 9 months, and profits dropped almost 20%. The firm reported that overall, its MFDs, that's its multifunction devices, and unit shipments, were off for the year. There was an increase in color hardware, but that was more than offset by declines in monochrome. Inkjet hardware sales also fell, and the non-hardware revenue fell pretty steeply. They saw double-digit declines in laser cartridges sales. So Canada had a pretty bad year. Epson is really fundamentally changing the way it does business. It really wants to rely more on high-margin hardware. It's also moving up market. I think the company is having some success in penetrating the dealer channel, especially with its RIPS devices. Those are the machines that have got the packages of inks that are on the side. They've been able to really lower the cost of color printing with these machines. But with that said, the company did have difficulties in 2019. Total printer hardware and supplies was down. The SOHO printer, surprisingly, we saw those sales grow in mature markets, but they were down overall. By the end of the year, we heard that they had sold 10.2 million high-capacity inkjet printers in total since those machines launched. So we got a little bit of an update there. HP is a company that has been reevaluating its overall business model for a few years. They're trying to rely more on programs like Instant Ink, and they have new hardware that Christina is going to talk to us about in a minute that are based on bulk ink and toner supplies systems. And they really are trying to move away from the old razor and blade model. But last year it was a real tough year for HP. It was fairly surprising. The company admitted that they had miscalculated some of the demand for cartridges in the EMEA states and in that whole region, and that trouble kind of went along over the course of the year. However, it wasn't just consumables that fell. We noticed that their hardware unit shipments fell over the course of the year too. And again, we think that this is a sign that that demand for hard copy is slacking in some of the mature markets. Konica Minolta, a very strong player. They had a great year in 2018, but last year was not so good. Again, they had a pretty tough compare because they were going up against a banner year. But overall, their hardware sales softened. The office group saw declines of about 6% through the first half, and we know that the revenue and profits were down, and their forecast was cut. So that was not a good year for them either. And then Ricoh has really dramatically rethought its channel strategy, and it's improved its profitability. It's focusing now more on higher end machines, and it's been able to execute somewhat on that strategy. As a result, their MFP revenue was flat, but their printer sales really slid last year during the first half. We think that for the year, I don't think it's going to be a very good year. Total hardware sales were off by 1%, but we think it'll probably be a little bit worse than that. So overall, we don't have a lot of good news from the OEMs, but we do know that they are really refocusing and looking for new ways to be profitable as demand for hard copy falls in the mature markets. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Christina.
Okay, let's talk hardware. At Actionable Intelligence, we track A4 and A3 inkjet laser and LED hardware, focusing mostly on the U.S., as well as on some interesting overseas products. And if we look at our next slide, what we see is 2019 was about on a par with the last couple of years in terms of new introductions. The jury's out on whether we're going to see one of those big upticks in product introductions in 2020 to match what we saw in 2012 and 2016. It could be that certain market dynamics make that a bit less likely in 2020. We'll have to see. On our next slide, let's look at the types of hardware launched. As you can see, from 2012 to more recent years, we've seen a shift from monochrome to color products. Although mono and A4 and A3 devices, they remain important, and thus we continue to see introductions in those categories as well. In 2019, compared with the year prior, we saw a bit fewer in terms of inkjet introductions and a bit more A4 and A3 color laser and LED. Let's move on to our next slide, where we look at the inkjet market in terms of color speed and cost per page. I've said this before, and I'm sure I'll say it again, but if we made a chart like this 10 years ago, there would have been just two circles, one for consumer inkjets, which have lower color print speeds and higher color cost per page, and one for SOHO inkjets, which have higher color print speeds and lower color cost per page. But over the last decade, inkjet technology has really expanded, and it now includes refillable ink tank models, which have consumer-like print speeds but incredibly low cost per page. Both last year and this year, we've seen some hybrid-type devices from Brother that use cartridges that feed the ink into an internal storage tank. Now, these offer low cost per page, but not as low as on a true refillable ink tank model. Meanwhile, HP and Epson have pushed inkjet technology into the office, with devices that use page-wide arrays of stationary print heads to offer super fast print speeds and very competitive page costs. So far, HP is the only vendor offering these devices in an A4 format, while both HP and Epson offer A3 inkjet MFPs. On our next slide, I want to say that color speed and cost per page are really just only one way at looking at classes of inkjets. Here we show a few others, including average color and black cost per page, average print speeds, and average prices for 2019 models in a few different categories. But let's move on and look more closely at exactly what vendors introduced in these various inkjet printer classes last year. In the consumer cartridge-based category, Canon refreshed its popular Pixma TS line of products. Of the new machines, the TS5320 was probably the most significant because it introduced a brand new set of integrated print head cartridges, the PG260 and CL261 color series. Epson refreshed its consumer inkjets as well, the Workforce WF2830 and Expression Home XP4100. Those were particularly significant because they use the new Epson 212 and 212 XL family of ink tanks. We didn't see a lot of consumer cartridge-based inkjet introductions from HP in the US, except for a new eco-friendly smartphone printer, the Tango Terra. If we turn to the SOHO inkjet devices, we saw Brother expand its family of inkvestment tank models that combine what it sees as the best features of the refillable ink tank category in cartridge-based printers. Last year, Brother introduced its lowest price model yet in this family, the $159 MFC J895DW. Epson expanded its line of business edition models for its commercial channel with the EC4020, 4030, and 4040. And in the biggest launch we saw this year for Soho inkjets, HP refreshed its OfficeJet Pro line, which HP claims is the best-selling business inkjet printer line in the US. These devices introduced several new ink tanks, which featured a new chip, and that included the HP 910, 910XL, 916XL, 962, 962XL. HP also is seeking to drive instant ink enrollment with a new plan for higher volume users called the Instant Ink Business Plan. It was an important year for refillable ink tank models. In the US, Epson refreshed its line of Echo Tank all-in-ones and added some new models, including the 2720 and 4700, which were really at the lowest prices yet we've seen in this lineup. The 2720 in particular is its first sub-$200 model in the US. The lower price models introduced new ink bottles, but the rest of the lineup used the same ink bottles as the previous generation. While Epson brought its Echo Tank line down toward new lower price points, Canon kind of worked in the opposite direction and introduced the new Pixma G series Mega Tank models, and these are designed for higher volume users and have higher price points. These machines use new ink bottles as well. But we were surprised to see HP very busy in the refillable ink tank segment in 2019. It introduced the Smart Tank 500 and 600 for emerging markets midway through the year. And then just before 2019 ended, HP brought to market in the US its Smart Tank Plus 551 and 651. Now, refillable ink tank printers in the US really mark a huge shift in HP's strategy, because until now, HP has mainly been targeting users in developed markets who are sensitive about the cost of ink with its Instant Ink plan. HP has so far been very quiet about this launch, so we look forward to hearing more from the company this year about its refillable ink tank strategy for the US. Moving on to our next slide, there's one class of inkjet device we have yet to mention, and that's monochrome inkjets. Epson has been selling monochrome inkjets for a while, but in 2019, we saw Epson expand its mono inkjet line in two different directions. First, in the refillable ink tank category, Epson introduced its first monochrome Echo Tank devices in the US. Also, Epson added to its A3 inkjet MFP lineup by offering its first monochrome line head MFP, and this machine uses Epson's stationary print head technology to achieve super fast print speeds of up to about 100 pages per minute. While we're talking about line head technology, one thing to note is that aside from this one device, we really didn't see much in the way of new A4 or A3 office class devices using either HP PageWide or Epson line head technology. So 2019 in general was a bit quiet in this regard. Okay, now let's turn to the new laser or LED hardware we saw in 2019. Some interesting trends we just want to note for you here is a big one is a continued shift toward multifunction. The segment where we saw the most single function printers was A4 mono, but once you get to the A3 segments, we saw very few single function printers introduced last year. As shown by the average prices and print speeds in this category, vendors are really busy trying to move their lines up market to target those higher volume users. Of course, all these vendors continue to crank out lower priced hardware because these devices are strong sellers, especially in emerging markets. But they do want to drive demand for more fully featured, faster, higher volume models. So we saw lots of those types of machines introduced last year. Moving to our next slide. The shift to color is real, but the A4 mono category remains very important for vendors. Canon introduced a whole host of new image class and image runner A4 devices that were mono in 2019. Its newest products, they all feature new toner cartridges. We've really seen Canon sort of step up the pace of its toner cartridge introductions lately, and we think that's due largely to increased aftermarket competition. It was also an important year for HP in the A4 monochrome category. HP refreshed its very popular LaserJet Pro 400 and 500 series and introduced new LaserJet Managed 600 series devices for its dealer channel. The 400 and 500 series, they use a new Echo Smart toner formulation that helps lower energy consumption, and all these machines introduce new toner cartridges with new anti-fraud technology. But HP's most exciting A4 monochrome launch of 2019 was no doubt its Never Stop lasers. These are built as the world's first toner tank devices, and they use a reload kit that refills an internal tank with toner. These machines were first introduced in China and then rolled out in other emerging markets. As I said before, the HP Never Stop devices were definitely the most exciting A4 monochrome machines of the year because we think they have the potential to do the laser category what Epson's refillable ink tank devices did to the inkjet market. And another important thing to note here is HP's not going to have to split his revenue for these models with Canon because the Never Stop devices are based on HP and Samsung technology. We also saw a new A4 mono hardware from Lexmark, which expanded its low-price Go series, Ricoh, which launched this new IM series, Sharp, Toshiba, and Xerox. The Xerox devices here are notable because they were introduced after the HP Xerox Charlie talked about, and they use HP or really Samsung engines. However, they don't represent a major transition in Xerox line toward HP products because they replace machines that used Samsung engines. A4 color MFPs, of course, are one of the better performing segments of the market today. So we saw a lot of focus on this category and on some single function printers as well. From Canon, we saw a fleet of new A4 color image class devices and image runner MFPs that use new toner cartridges. HP refreshed its popular LaserJet 400 series and introduced new toner cartridges in those devices. Lexmark announced 7 new devices, all in its Go line, and these products feature a more compact engine, and they use all-in-one toner cartridges, which marks a change as the previous devices used separate consumables. Also significant, Konica Minolta's launch of A4 color devices that use a new engine design and new consumables, and we also saw new A4 color machines from Ricoh, Kyocera, and Sharp. So we've talked about A4, so now let's move up market to A3. In the A3 monochrome market, Canon introduced new Image Runner Advanced 3rd edition models. They're essentially the same as the models introduced the previous year, but with some security enhancements. HP added some new A3 mono managed MFPs at lower price points. We also saw new Kyocera machines, 11 new monochrome A3 models from Sharp, and the new eStudio 2800 series from Toshiba. None of these models introduced new consumables. We see vendors looking to leverage their investments in platforms introduced over the last few years. In the A3 color market, Canon launched new Image Runner Advanced 3rd edition models with the security enhancements, but again, no new engines or consumables. Similar to what we saw on the monochrome side of the market, HP launched some lower priced A3 color MFPs in its managed portfolio. HP also introduced the single function color LaserJet Enterprise M751 series, which does use new toner cartridges. But one of 2019's more important A3 color launches was Konica Minolta's C360i series. They used the first new engine for this class of device we've seen from the company in several years. They use a new low melt toner, and they introduced new consumables. Another key A3 color introduction was Ricoh's IMC series. While Ricoh has new branding on these MFPs and many new technologies, the print engine themselves are not new. Most of the consumables, however, are new, except for the toner on the entry-level models. In other news, Kyocera introduced new Task Alpha machines that use existing supplies. Sharp updated its high-speed A3 color lineup with some new devices, and those also use existing consumables. And that's about it on the hardware front, so back over to you, Charlie.
Thanks, Christine. I appreciate it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the supplies industry. And I live up in Boston, Massachusetts, where we tend to drop our R's. And what we would say up here is that 2019 was the most transformative year ever. Excuse me. We wouldn't necessarily cough like that. But anyway, it really was a remarkable year. I don't think since we launched the website in 2010 that we've seen so many changes, especially to the remanufacturing industry. We continue to see the OEMs, as I mentioned before, reevaluate their razor and blade model. They're getting more and more competitive in terms of being able to compete on price. The range of non-OEM supplies is broadening. We're seeing more and more new build products. These new build products are taking market share, and again, particularly at the remanufacturer's expense. The competitive landscape in North America for the reman industry looks completely different today than it did a year ago. It really looks completely different today than it even did 6 months ago. So we've really kind of seen a big change in the industry here. And we wonder if there may be a similar transformation underway in Europe. It's happening a little bit more slowly, but we're also seeing changes in China as that industry consolidates. So, I think the takeaway from that is that there more change is inevitable in 2020. So we really think that the market is being transformed by the market dynamics. Demand again for reman cartridges is shrinking because of OEMs and the new build. We've seen that for the past few years. The market for new build compatibles is becoming much more complex. Clones are still widely available, and especially on e-commerce sites like Amazon and others. And we're going to do a white paper on this, on the threats that clones pose for the market. Keep an eye out for that. It should be out in the next couple of days. But the availability of really high quality, non-infringing cartridges is growing. And this is taking share. I think it's taking share from clones as well as from remans. And these are remarkable products. I mean, there's certain large third-party manufacturers that have developed their own proprietary technologies, and they're now marketing what we call premium compatibles. Now, compatibles have been around for a long time, and there have been some pretty high quality new compatibles, but these were mostly for simpler designs. If you think about dual component cartridges, where you have toner in one cartridge and a drum in the other, we've seen a lot of those new builds for years and years. But what we've seen over the last couple of years is the emergence of these all-in-one cartridges built on all new designs. And we did a white paper last year that's available on our website for download that really tracks the history of the new build industry. And like I say, it's there for you to download for free, and you should take a look and let me know what you think. So over the past few years, as the availability of these premium new builds has become available, we've seen more and more companies offering them. So a couple of our sponsors, LD Products and Static Control, now offers these high-end new builds. I think one of the most important news events last year in North America came from LD when it released the testing that it had done on its compatibles, specific compatibles, but it was testing that was done by BLI, and it really validated the claims that LD had made about the performance of these cartridges. If all this is true, we really think that the premium new builds could be a category killer, especially for remans. But like all non-OEM consumables, and this doesn't, if it's new build or reman or whatever, we know that the OEMs are really monitoring these markets, and they're keeping a close eye on these products. And we know that new builds are at the center of some lawsuits that Christina is going to talk about in a minute. So we're following all this very, very closely, and we expect that this is going to continue for the years to come. So to quote David Bowie, we've seen a lot of changes in the U.S. industry. Really, the biggest story of 2019 was the acquisition of Clover Imaging by its executive team and by Northwest Equity Partners, NEP. We had started to hear as early as August that an acquisition was in play, but the deal really didn't conclude until November. Again, I think that a lot of this was brought about because of the downgrading of the 4L debt by Moody's. This was covered very, very closely by the regular mainstream news organizations. Again, Clover had lost one of its biggest clients with Xerox moving over to HP, and the ramifications were pretty profound. When the dust settled, Clover had a new owner, and 4L and Clover Technologies Group were pushed into bankruptcy, so they filed their protection in December. We think that the deal is going to be really good for Clover. We think it's going to put a floor under its declining revenues. And we estimate that revenues have been declining in Clover for the last 5 years, about between 10 and 20% annually, so pretty significantly. One of the reasons that we think that this is a really good deal for Clover is that it's going to get them closer to the mega dealer Marco. Marco is, I think it's a $500 million equipment dealer that's also held by NEP. We have heard emphatically from the Clover management team that there will be no hookup between Marco and Clover. Clover is not going to become a subsidiary or integrated into Marco. So we believe that, but we also think that there are synergies that exist that will be good for both of those companies. The fate of LMI Solutions, this was the second largest reman in the U.S. after Clover. The fate of LMI was not as rosy. After learning about the Xerox deal, we understand that Xerox did buy some product from LMI. LMI had been in trouble, and we've been hearing all kinds of rumors about difficulties there beginning in June and July. And then their new investor, Turnspire Capital, that had invested in them last August, they pulled out. That was in August of 2018. They pulled their investment in August of 2019, and that led to LMI going into receivership. So now we're watching to see what's going to happen with CIG. The management team there said in late summer that they were going to make some strategic acquisitions. And if you think of Clover, one of the ways that Clover got to be the biggest remanufacturer in the world was through acquisition. So we'll be watching to see if they do make some acquisitions. We know that they picked up LMI's assets, but it could have been that LMI's assets were on fire sales. So we don't know that that is definitive proof that CIG will go on a buying binge. One company that we do think is going to be rolling up the industry is Blackford Capital. They have announced at the end of the year, they announced that they had purchased the brand licensing rights to Cartridge World in the U.S., and they also took over the operation of their master franchises in the U.S. So this is interesting. I think that many folks on the call recognize the name Cartridge World. They operate some 230 stores in the U.S. At one time, we would estimate that they had over 700 stores in North America. So they have closed a number of their stores, but we still think that they're over $100 million in revenue. Initially, the problem with Cartridge World was that they were doing in-store remanufacturing, and this really didn't work out for a variety of reasons we don't have to go into. But they really shifted their business model now, and they are essentially they want to be a dealer and a solutions provider along with print solutions for small to medium-sized businesses, especially small businesses. And this is a great market for them, and it's one that Blackford Capital is very interested in, and they've expressed their interest a number of times over the last couple of years. You may remember in 2018, they made an investment in online tech stores that supplies wholesalers, and that's the biggest importer of new build cartridges in North America. So with this acquisition, we think that Blackford is really starting to gain some traction. We hear that another deal is about to break any day, and we're going to watch our website for news about that. So we're also seeing signs of stress in the European reman industry. It's the big guys over there, just like in the U.S., that have been suffering. You can see the numbers here from Turbine. Turbine's a public company, and so they report their revenue, though they're making it more and more difficult to track exactly what's going on there because they're not doing their financials in English anymore, and it's more and more difficult to be able to get the text and be able to translate it. So we will continue to follow Turbine, but it's the information that they provide us is less and less. One thing that we heard about last year too, it was about Clover and their European business. when Moody's did its debt assessment in March. And by the way, when Moody's looked at Clover in March, they actually upgraded their debt. But when they did that assessment, they said that Clover's European revenue was at about 90 million euro last year. And we think that the cartridge sales now are between 40 and 50 million, or about half of what we had seen in the past. So we don't think that, that you look at the European largest remanufacturers, we see that they're struggling, but we're hearing that the smaller guys, the regional players, are faring much better. And that's different than what we have in the United States. In the US, because of consolidation, many regional players have gone away, but there are still many remanufacturers that are operating at the country level, and we hear that they're doing pretty well. I will be in Germany for the Paper World show on the 25th, and if we have Europeans that are on the call and would like to set up a time to meet, I would love to meet with you and learn more about what's going on in the European market. We're seeing signs of change in China as well. Their new build manufacturers are feeling a lot of pressure. Our research is indicating that unit shipments for most firms are up, but their revenue is down. So that means that their raised within profits are being squeezed. We know that there have been several large new build manufacturers in China that have gone out of business. They have been acquired by some of the bigger players over there. We really started to see the industry starting to coalesce. The two largest players in China now are Dinglong Chemical, which owns Mito Color and also Retec, and Nine Star. And of course, Nine Star has its own G&G brand, as well as a couple of other remanufacturers that it's acquired, like TopJet. And in addition to that, both of these companies sell a range of raw materials as well as finished cartridges. So they're very big companies. At the second tier, we see companies like Astra Graphics and Warink and PrintRite, we're wondering what's going to happen with these guys. Are they going to start to grow through acquisition, or will they seek to be acquisition targets? And of course, that's something that we'll be following in 2020. The China's public firms are Dinglong and Nine Star. Dinglong had the first half of the year, their revenue fell, but their profits, their net profits rose. But we're hearing that the second half of the year has been bad. We actually heard from a source in Singapore that some of the numbers out and profitability is way down. So we're trying to get more information about that. I just heard that news this morning. One thing that we did see from Dinglong last year was an interesting move. Dinglong acquired Speed Infotech. Speed Infotech is a remanufacturer of ink cartridges. They've been around for a long time. They're a really good reputation, and they have a pretty big footprint in Europe. So that was interesting. Nine Star appears to have been really the big winner last year. The firm reported that the first 9 months of the year, its revenue was up almost 6%. But we followed Morningstar, and they said that the operating profit surged 40%. And then Nine Star said that its biggest business unit, Lexmark, saw some improvements in its business in the second half of the year and increased its profitability. So, we mentioned earlier that first half was not so good, but it looks like they recovered in the second half. The firm's consumables and chip business have been negatively affected by the market. And again, that's I think what we've been talking about, in previous slides. We'll have to see what happens there. One thing that we really paid attention to a lot this year was what's going on in Amazon. Now, of course, this is the one of the biggest channels for third-party supplies, and there are hundreds of different brands of supplies that are available on Amazon. We saw a new entrant. Clover's been selling cartridges, new build and remanufactured cartridges on Amazon for years, but they really kind of streamlined their offering and unified in one storefront. They support a variety of different Amazon resellers, including Daisy, CIG, and actually Amazon itself. So they seem to be getting more serious about their Amazon business. As all this happens, we're starting to understand more about who the large suppliers are. Even though there are hundreds and hundreds of brands, we know, or we think that there are only a limited number of suppliers to Amazon. And so, we found out last year, or 2019, that Astrographic is one of the companies that's selling some of the most popular brands, according to Brothers' lawsuit. Brothers says that they sell Archon, Aztec, and Cool Toner. All of that is coming from Astra, either from Astra directly or through some of its partners. So we know that vendors are trying to curb the flow of clones onto Amazon, but it's still a major channel for infringing consumables. Christina's going to talk about some of the takedowns from last year, but we also learned at the end of the year that Amazon and the Imaging Supplies Coalition, which is a trade organization that watches out for trademark and other IP infringement, the two of them are going to team up to form a task force to better police the marketplace. And it's not an easy job. And again, we've been writing a lot about what's going on in Amazon. We see all kinds of shady things happening with some of the less scrupulous vendors as they use new black hat ways to change the reviews and post fake reviews and everything. So it really is still a pretty unknown territory, and it's open to a lot of outlaws. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Christina so she can talk about some of the legal stuff from last year.
Okay, I'm going to start with some of the patent actions related to supplies last year. And probably the biggest legal story of the year was that Canon lost its Section 337 investigation before the ITC, looking at infringement of its toner cartridge patents. The fact that aftermarket supplies firms were able to prove their products did not infringe in this venue was really something new, and obviously the exact opposite of the outcome that Canon wanted. But in terms of what aftermarket supplies companies sell, this decision didn't really change all that much. The manufacturers named in this action, they brought to market redesigned products and even obtained Canon's admission that the redesigns were non-infringing just a few months into the investigation. And so they're still continuing to sell those redesigned products. Canon, of course, has appealed the ITC's decision, and the appeal is something we're going to follow in the new year. While it had a loss, Canon also had lots of wins to boast about, including the removal of thousands of infringing aftermarket toner cartridge listings from Amazon sites. In some instances, we're seeing Canon's Amazon takedown campaign lead to new litigation being filed. And Canon did indeed file lots of toner cartridge patent suits last year. In the US, it asserted a set of 7 patents used in older cartridge designs against LD products, V for Ink, and Globus Trading. The V for Ink suit is actually already over and done. Canon got a default judgment in that one. Both LD and Globus have answered Canon's lawsuits and filed counterclaims, so those are some ongoing cases we'll be following. In 2019, Canon filed at least 18 toner cartridge patent infringement lawsuits in Germany, plus new litigation in Russia. And if all that weren't enough, Canon announced favorable developments in toner cartridge patent cases filed in previous years in countries like Germany, Brazil, Italy, and Russia. 2019 was a really huge year on the legal front for Brother. In August, Brother brought its first request for a Section 337 investigation into infringement of its toner cartridges to the ITC. Respondents included 32 different companies, including Astor, and a huge number of resellers. In its complaint, Brother really laid out a clear case for why it feels it needs the relief the ITC can offer. It explained that the respondents, most of whom do business mainly on Amazon, have a greater share of the replacement market for the cartridges in this case than Brother does. Of those 32 respondents, only 7 are still participating, and the investigation is expected to be wrapped up before the end of November. Epson had a very busy and successful year in terms of U.S. litigation. It filed 3 new complaints, and those are part of an ongoing series of inkjet cartridge lawsuits. One was filed against a group of companies and individuals that do business on Amazon and elsewhere using a huge array of seller names you might have heard of, like Jarbo, Office World, Jetser, Oser, Maru, and lots of others. Epson also filed a lawsuit against Straight Out of Ink and another against a company called Vintrick. Now, Epson has a really favorable track record in this series of lawsuits, and so it saw some favorable resolutions in these cases last year. Probably the biggest news on this front is it got a $17 million default judgment and an injunction against Inkjet 2U and Wharf. It got a default judgment with no damages award and just an injunction against a pair of companies called Try the Ink and Ink Pro Today. Epson also settled its lawsuit against Easy Ink, Cartridge Evolution, and F-Trade, and some other related companies. And these two lawsuits resulted in consent judgments and permanent injunctions. In late-breaking news, Epson recently finalized a settlement with STS down in Florida, and we're awaiting the court signing off on a consent judgment in that case as well. Meanwhile, over in Australia, an appeals court found that remanufactured cartridges sold by Caladad and made by Nine Star infringed Epson patents. And that ruling's interesting because it could make life a bit more challenging for remanufacturers in that country. Epson may have also finally seen the end of a trademark counterfeiting case out of Nevada that began all the way back in 2016. Just before 2019 ended, the Ninth Circuit upheld a $12 million default judgment awarded to Epson in this case. HP didn't file any new consumable patent lawsuits in the US last year, but it did file a new lawsuit against Sharing Color in China over inkjet cartridges using print heads from Microjet. One of the patents HP is asserting here was also the subject of its lawsuit against Speed Infotech in China. And in the Speed case, the court found the HP patent to be valid and enforceable. So this is one we look forward to following and seeing if HP achieves a favorable outcome here like it did in the Speed case. HP has also been focused on protecting its IP in Europe by targeting remanufactured cartridge sellers that use cores first sold outside Europe under the principle of regional exhaustion. Last year, HP expanded its cease and desist letter campaign over the regional exhaustion issue from Germany, where it began, to other countries, including Spain, Italy, and France. Next slide, please. OEM patent lawsuits, of course, are not the only type of legal action impacting the industry. Last year, we followed a number of class actions and shareholder litigation against OEMs. One type of class action that keeps recurring pertains to one of the key strategies OEMs deploy against the aftermarket, and that's firmware updates that lock out aftermarket consumables. In 2019, a final settlement was approved, resolving a consolidated class action against HP over this issue. Epson was a bit luckier in that a similar class action against it was voluntarily dismissed after an agreement was reached. But almost right away, after these two cases came to an end, both HP and Epson were named in two other would-be class actions over the same issue. Brother was named in the class action over toner remaining in his cartridges. We've seen a number of such cases over the years, and some resolved one way, some resolved another. Last year, we also followed 3 shareholder derivative actions against Xerox's board and Carl Icahn. 2 center on Xerox's bid to acquire HP and Icahn's purchase of HP stock. Another centers on pretty much everything that has happened at Xerox since Carl Icahn gained control there. For the most part, these lawsuits are sort of breach of fiduciary duty and breach of contract lawsuits. This is not a new case, but last year we continued to follow a securities class action against Lexmark that claims its share price dropped a number of years ago, back when it was publicly traded, after it revealed its supplies business was weaker than it had said previously. Last year, the plaintiffs got some good news in this case because it survived a motion to dismiss. Another type of key lawsuit OEMs face from time to time are patent infringement cases filed by non-practicing entities, what some of you better know as patent trolls. Last year, though, we saw kind of an interesting trend, which was that patents that were once owned by certain printer OEMs and then assigned to these NPEs were asserted against OEMs in new suits. For example, I wrote about it just today. A company called Slingshot Printing has filed 4 lawsuits against HP using old Lexmark inkjet patents that were subsequently purchased by Funai. Another company called Drive Print filed suit against HP using an old BenQ inkjet patent. There's a company called Massa, or Midwest Athletics, that filed new lawsuits against Ricoh and Xerox, asserting Kodak patents. And more recently, there's a company called Monument Peak Ventures, and they've purchased 1,000+ portfolio of Kodak patents from Intellectual Ventures and filed a patent suit against Toshiba. We also saw aftermarket litigation, including a win in a patent case filed in China by NineStar against Zhengyin. Aster and Yorktown Industries, also known as Concord Supplies, they have a bunch of claims and counterclaims against each other in court. Another interesting thing was Mito. We saw it warn its customer about Amazon sellers falsely using its name. Charlie also mentioned a key partnership that has a potential to curb infringement issues online. That's the Imaging Supplies Coalition's partnership with Amazon. And last, we continue to follow seizure and forfeiture orders issued by the ITC on aftermarket consumables. Now, last year, the ITC issued 14 of these orders, which is up slightly compared to the previous 2 years, but down from some sort of high watermark set in 2015 and 2016. And that's it on the legal front.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Christina. I can't imagine that the seizures are down because there are fewer infringing cartridges coming in. So I really wonder what happened with that whole initiative. It's kind of an interesting turn that we've watched over the last few years. We're up at the top of the hour now, and so I apologize if you've got questions and we've eaten into your time. I'm willing to stick around. Christina, can you stay?
Yes.
And how about you, Melanie? Are you available to field some of these questions for us?
I am. You know what, though? It seems that you were both so incredibly informative that I am not seeing any questions popping up on my dashboard. So if you are listening and you have a question, please do submit it through the dashboard. We'll wait around maybe for another minute and just see if anything comes through.
I know that there were some people who had trouble logging in. So I don't know if this is some representation of that. If you did have trouble, or if any of your colleagues had trouble logging in, do know that this talk will be available, and we expect that it should be available within 24 hours on our website, and you can come by and pick it up just as soon as it's there. So take a look tomorrow morning.
Quick question just came through that you could answer quickly. What does SOHO mean?
Small office, home office. So it's like the environment I work from, up to very small offices.
All right, perfect. We have somebody asking, what do we think about the Xerox potential acquisition of HP? Any of the puts and takes for that?
Well, I'll give you my 2 cents, and then Christina can give you hers. We don't have a party line on this, so I think, one thing we don't really follow, what the value of the company or how the value of the company would change. We just kind of look at things more on tactical and on the actionable level. And at that point, I think it would be great for HP to gain, Xerox's extensive network, especially since HP wants to be a player in the A3 space, and they've made all the investment in the acquisition of Samsung. I'm sure they have great technology. They have such a strong brand. That would be a real benefit to have such a strong channel organization. And likewise, I think Xerox is going to gain access to another channel where HP is just huge in, and that's retail. HP has a lot of relationships with retailers and resellers, and that would, that potentially could be good for Xerox. However, with that said, Xerox has tried to play in the retail space before. I'm really old, and so I remember when they had their, I think it was called the Blue Dog campaign around their inkjet, and that all fell apart. Then they pulled out of that, 15 years ago. So Do they really want to go back there? And then, what technology-wise, are we going to see new technologies being unlocked? And how do you unlock value that way? I just don't know. I think that there is a less painful way to go about this. And, in some ways, the way that they can be fully leveraged and everything, this kind of reminds me of the old corporate raider things we used to hear about back in the 1980s. So those didn't end well. So I don't know. Christina, what do you think?
Well, one thing I just wanted to add to that is the regional play to consider with Xerox and Fujifilm sort of parting ways. Fujifilm has said, well, watch out, we're going to sell our devices worldwide, and Xerox is trying to do the same. And if you think about it, like Xerox really needs HP for that because HP has presence in the markets it wants to move into, and Xerox does not. So I think that's one reason why we see Xerox really pushing hard for this acquisition.
All right. I think that wraps it up nicely. Anything else to add there, Charles?
Nope.
Good. Okay. We have a question about any OEM litigation in the UK. Is there anything you're aware of that you'd like to share?
I can't think of any big cases. Charlie, can you think of any?
No, I really can't.
All right.
They haven't been too active in the UK that I know of. Am I wrong, Christina?
Yeah, a bunch of, several years ago, we did see more in the UK. And, unfortunately, we're reliant to some extent on what OEMs talk about for overseas litigation. And we just haven't heard a lot since Canon's wave of lawsuits in 2014 and Epson in previous years, stretching back to like 2006 or so. From 2006 to 2014, they had a wave of cases there.
Yeah, that brings up a really good point. I had an OEM brand manager one time who told me that, a lot of this activity, it's like a duck. You see a duck moving across the water, doesn't look like there's much going on. But when you look underneath the duck, there's a whole bunch of activity going on. So there could be stuff going on in these markets, cease and desist letters, that type of thing that we'll never get wind of. So just because you don't see the lawsuit doesn't mean that the lawyers aren't busy.
All right, sounds good. We'll take another one here. Does STS settling with Epson mean they will continue to operate their consumables business after litigation?
As far as I know, yes. And in fact, if you read, it sort of spells out what they can sell and what they can't sell. Unfortunately for them, it's a pretty long list of things they can no longer sell, about 70 different models of cartridges, but they can sell remanufactured cartridges as long as they use the original Epson circuit board.
All right, excellent. Any prediction for the U.S. print drop percentage in 2020?
Well, I think that it's going to be kind of closer to the 4%, but I don't see it going off a cliff or seeing anything really dramatic. I just know that for the longest time we keep hearing print volumes are declining at a rate of 1 to 2% a year, and we're going to challenge that and say that it's more like 3 or 4% a year in the developed countries.
Okay, excellent. Let's see if we can get to another one. Do you have any idea how big the USA new build market is versus the remanufactured cartridge market?
I would say percentage-wise, new build has about 70% market share. I think we have not done like a post-year look at what that means in terms of revenue, but I do think that overall the entire North American cartridge market now is probably under 1.5 billion for the manufacturers. This is not the retail value. I'm just talking about the manufacturers to sell in a year, and it could now, and again we have to go back and turn the dials on the machine. It could be that it's under $1 billion. but I would say about 70% of that is new build.
All right. Do we have time for another one?
Sure, I do. How about you, Christina?
Yep, can do one more.
Perfect. Is there potential for premium compatibles to break into the dealer channels and start to take more significant share from OEMs?
Well, I think that they're in the process of doing that. And, I think we spell it out pretty clearly in that white paper. This is the channel where the premium cartridges are that they're going after. It's always an interesting question if consumers will go directly from an OEM to a new build without at least trying a reman at first. So we see these premiums as a much bigger threat to remanufactured cartridges than we do to OEM. But the dealer channel, dealers are really smart. They're very educated consumers. They may be able to put all the tests in place and the qualifiers in place that allow them to more easily move from OEM to new build. So I guess my answer is I think that these new build premiums, much bigger threat to remanufacturers, but they could, in some cases, grab OEM share.
Excellent. That sounds good. Well, we do have a few more questions. If one of your questions is still sitting in our dashboard, we encourage you to please email them over to Charles or Christina. Charles's email is displayed right now on your screen, cbrewer@action-intel.com. And with that, we are going to wrap it up. Thanks to everyone for attending. And Charles, Christina, did you have anything else to add or final thoughts?
I'd like to just thank everybody for coming and for sticking around and for submitting the questions. And I really would like to thank Brother Epson, Future Graphics, HP, LD, and Static Control for sponsoring us today. Again, we can't do this stuff unless we get sponsors, and these guys are just great. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to the team. You guys are awesome too. Christina, anything you'd like to add?
Nope, I was just going to thank our sponsors as well.
All right. Well, we are very appreciative, and especially we want to thank the attendees. So, don't forget, we have a special $100 offer on our website. So with that, I'm going to shut it down.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.